Tonight we're in Leeds, and welcome to Question Time. Good evening, whether you're listening, watching, whether you've come here to be in our audience, you're very welcome, and our panel too. Our panel tonight, the Conservative Defence Minister, Anna Soubry, the Shadow Minister for the Cabinet Office, Lucy Powell, who's responsible for running Labour's day-to-day election campaign, the former leader of the Liberal Democrats, Charles Kennedy, the leader of the Green Party, Natalie Bennett, and the editor of Private Eye, Ian Hislop. And of course, as you know, if you want to join in the debate, you have Twitter and text at your service. Twitter, our hashtag is BBCQT. You can follow us at BBC Question Time. You can text 83981, and the red button may well tell you what others are saying if you want to see that. Our first question is from Paul Sykes, please. Paul Sykes.
In an increasingly uncertain world, is it reckless for the government not to commit to a real terms increase in defence spending?
A thing that was debated today, and the government isn't committed to keeping defence spending at 2% of GDP. Lucy Powell, what's your view?
Well, I think the government should. It's our international obligation to have defence spending at 2%, and that is something that we should be doing. But I think before we get on to sort of percentages and defence spending, we should just remember what that represents. That represents our armed forces, who do an incredible job putting their lives at risk on the front line defending this country. And I think our first duty as a country is to make sure that they've got the resources, the equipment, the rewards that they need to do that job that they do on behalf of all of us and in support of our allies on the front line.
How different is your policy from the present?
Well, I think what puts at risk, the thing that really puts at risk future defence spending is George Osborne's severe and extreme spending plans for the next Parliament. What they will mean is colossal cuts to defence spending, as well as other areas like police and social care. And that word colossal is not mine. It's the word that the Institute for Fiscal Studies used in analysing his spending plans. So his extreme spending plans will take public expenditure in this country back to a time before we even had an NHS and before the Second World War. And I think that is something that should concern us all because it's a terrible plan that he's got.
OK. Anna Soubry.
Lisa, do forgive me, but I don't think you've obviously listened to what your Treasury people are saying. And your own party's policy is not at the moment to commit to 2%. So on that, we are the same.
No, we're not the same. Our spending plans are very different.
Do forgive me, I didn't interrupt, but I can assure you, Chris Leslie was on the radio on Monday and he made it very clear they could not give a commitment. And at the moment, we aren't giving, let's be honest about it, we're not giving a commitment that after 2016, that it'll be 2% of GDP. I hope very much that we are able to make that commitment because the defence of our realm is the primary function, the defence of people, the primary function of any government. And look, well, the situation was when we came into power in 2010, we had a defence budget that had a big black hole in it of £38 billion, and we fixed that so that our budget now is in good shape. We've got a budget of about £34 billion. And what we have done is we've made available £160 billion of money for equipment. And I could give you the list of all the things that we're doing, including the aircraft carriers, the various frigates and so on and so forth.
Those the ones with the planes on or the ones without the planes
No, because they will have the Lightning. No, that's
They will.
a myth. That's a myth. The Lightning has had difficulty over in America, but those planes will be there, and there'll be two aircraft carriers. And they will fly, Ian, and those ships will be going to sea. So we've got some of the best equipment of any country in the world. No, we have, or we've got good equipment, and it will get even better. The Scout Vehicle Programme, £34 billion. And this is what we've secured for the future, and in fact there'll be an increase in the equipment spending of about 1% in the next 10 years.
Why are you slipping from the 2%, which David Cameron in 2010 said he thought there should be real increases?
No, actually, he said only, I think it was last summer, or it may have been earlier, that we want to do 2%. And of course, we are the second biggest spender in NATO, the biggest in the European Union.
What's happened to that 2%, which NATO... I mean, you know the Americans have been complaining about British defence spending.
Well, the Americans, of course, themselves have cut back their budget.
They spend 3.6%. don't they?
But what I certainly want us to do, I make no bones about it, I want us to do that 2%. And what David Cameron has said, and he said it at the NATO summit, is that all the NATO members should be spending 2%. And he's also said that he doesn't want to see any further reductions in personnel. So I'm hoping that we will be in a position whereby we can be true to that 2%. But let's be honest about it. You can only spend the money that you've got. And you can only have all these great things if you've got a good, strong economy. And you'll only get that, if I may say, with the return of a Conservative government. Because if you vote Labour, you will go back to chaos and bankruptcy. We are securing our economic future so we can do these things.
Do. Ian Hislop.
I mean, I don't want to overdo this, but the 2% isn't important. What you do with defence is you have a strategy, you know what you want to achieve with defence, and then you try not to waste money. And I'm afraid, I mean, one of the reasons our defences are in such problems at the moment is the catastrophic waste of money in equipment buying by the last two governments. It's enormous. You can't believe the billions they've wasted. Billions and billions on procurement. Totally inept. We have to do two things, not just say, here's 2%, here's more money down the drain. We have to decide what the armed forces are for, and after the last couple of conflicts, we do have to decide that. What are they for? And B, what do we need? And it's no good Mr Cameron saying they'll have whatever equipment they want if you're cutting the number of soldiers down to, what, 50,000?
No, that's not true.
The French police deployed more officers during the Charlie Hebdo shootings than our entire army.
Well, that's not right. No. You have 95,000 soldiers. Our army is 95,000.
And you are cutting that?
No, we're taking it down to 82,000. We're building up the reservists. Because
the reserves.
No, it's all right, Ian, but you know what? The best thing, if I may say, when you said we have to work out what we want for our armed forces, I agree with you. And there are a lot of people who, after now that we've withdrawn from Afghanistan, will commemorate the sacrifice and everything that took place tomorrow. But a lot of people have said, actually, we don't want to go into other countries again. Parliament had a vote, I think it was a terrible mistake, that we don't want to get involved in Syria. We don't want to even keep our options open. And I think as a society, we have to work out what do you want from your armed forces? Because there's a lot of people actually don't want us to go into conflict again. I think they're wrong, but I recognise that that's what lots of people are thinking after everything that's happened.
Natalie Bennett.
Well, I think I'd agree with you that Parliament has finally recognised the will of the people, as we saw with the march against the Iraq war. But I think we have to come back to the question that Paul asked about how can we be more secure. And we've got to think about what in the world will make us more secure. And supporting democracy, fighting poverty, fighting disease, ensuring that we get a deal at the Paris climate talks, those are absolutely key security issues. Now, in terms of the specific question about the level of our defence forces, the Green Party, we support the coalition plans to cut back the numbers of our military. We don't want to go further than they're planning to do, but we plan to do that with, of course, the exception of Trident nuclear weapons. We have these hideous weapons of mass destruction, and we can make the world a safer place by getting rid of them.
But your policy document was for the commitment to a large standing army being unnecessary, a navy of large warships around the coastline being unnecessary, squadrons of fighter planes being unnecessary, bases going to be turned into nature reserves, and the arms industry converted to wind and tidal power.
Yeah. What you're referring...
And the UK taking out of NATO. Is that all still on the cards, or has that been changed?
What you're referring to is our policies for a sustainable society, which have been built up over decades by Green Party members democratically. And that's...
But is that policy or not, then?
Well, that is long-term policy. We have there a vision of the kind of fairer, safer world that we want to create. What our policy will be for the next election will be the plans for the next 5 years, the manifesto, which will be released in a couple of weeks' time. So, and in that manifesto, we'll have a commitment. Well, we're talking about different time frames.
OK. Charles Kennedy.
Did I miss something here? Did the Defence Minister say that it was a terrible mistake that the House of Commons did not vote to invade Syria.
No, I didn't say that. It was a terrible mistake that we didn't keep our options open, because as you'll remember, Charles, the actual vote was about keeping our options open. And by rejecting that motion, we sealed off our options. So now we can't do anything in Syria. That was the terrible mistake.
So was that a mistake?
Yes, not to keep our options open. Absolutely. We should have kept our options open. And we've let Putin think that he can get away with stuff, because he knows we will not go and have anything to do with Syria.
Charles, what about the issue? What about the issue raised?
Ladies and gentlemen, dream on.
What about the issue raised in the question of committing to a real terms increase in defence spending?
I'm sorry?
The real terms increase in defence spending. Are you in favour of...
I'm in favour of 2%, yes.
You are in favour of 2%?
Yes.
And you're at the very back there. Yes.
I think I applaud what Ian says, because I think the subtext is really, what is Britain's role in the world? And that is, are we part of the alliance with America, protecting certain value systems? Putin's been mentioned. Are we merely a police force? We have to question what we're here for, and then we decide what the budget is and the determination of our government to execute that policy according to our role in the world.
Does that
and
seem
we
to be
haven't
happening
decided
to you?
that yet.
It hasn't been decided, you feel?
I don't think it's been decided yet. I think we're very worried about what's happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. I think that is making us very scared about what our history is. But we can look back over the last 150 years where Britain has stood back, rescinded, and then had to rebuild its capability. And I think, therefore, that is the issue that we dealt with.
The woman there on the right. And I'll come back to you, and then we'll move on. Yes.
Is it really a good idea to rely on reservists for the armed forces when armed forces personnel are highly trained, they need to be highly motivated? My husband is ex-RAF personnel. They are expected to react very, very quickly. Is it really a good idea to knock off regular army people and build up reservists?
It's about making a force that can deal with a modern world, and actually our reservists are remarkable. They're just as skilled and as trained as our regulars, and in fact tomorrow there'll be men and women that will be marching and be at St Paul's who served with just as much courage and just as much sacrifice and ability as they stand shoulder to shoulder with the regulars. So please don't do down the reservists.
No one's offering them disrespect. They're just saying it's a cheap option.
No, it's not a cheap option.
It is. That's the reason you get
There are many people who serve with great distinction as reservists, and they don't see themselves by any means as a cheap option.
And why should
they see themselves in times of contingency that they are there to come in and do the great job that they do. And that is what is needed, and all over the world. That's what America does. And they do it in Canada, they do it in Australia with great success. We shouldn't do down the reservists and the great
man up there in the second row from the back.
Natalie, you say that we should remove Trident to make the world a safer place. I believe the world is a safer place because we've got Trident.
I would ask you the question, under what circumstances could you imagine a sane British Prime Minister pressing the nuclear button? I hope the answer to that would be none. And there is also ongoing, right now, there's a strong global push for a ban on nuclear weapons. And a ban on nuclear weapons as a way forward, Britain choosing to get rid of Trident, not replace Trident, which would be a strong push towards that. And that really is where the world has to go.
OK. All right.
We all want peace.
All right.
We achieve it.
Maybe in an ideological world.
We all want a world with no nuclear weapons.
Maybe in an ideological world you can say that the whole country and the whole world wants to ban Trident, but yes, you're right. In no situation would you ever want that to happen, and I believe that's the reason why we need to keep it. Because other countries who may or may not have nuclear weapons, because I bet we don't know every single country that does, and other countries that do have them, don't press them because they know that we could if we ever needed to, but we wouldn't want to.
And if we are the signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, not living up to our obligations to move towards disarmament.
We're going to move on. All right, thank you. We're going to move on to another question now, because we've taken a quarter of an hour on that, and we've only got an hour tonight, as ever. Just before I do, we're going to be in Croydon next week, and Bolton the week after. The address to apply to, if you'd like to come to Croydon or Bolton, is there. Let's have this question coming from, is it Minos Perdios?
That's right.
I hope that's the right pronunciation.
Said it very
sir.
well, David.
Thank you very much. I didn't practice it, I just saw it here. Right, go on, far away.
Opinion polls show that no party will win an overall majority, and that we'll have another coalition. Would a Labour SNP coalition be a betrayal to the millions of English voters?
All right. Anna Subu, you start on that.
Well, here's a surprise. I agree with you. It would be a betrayal, but not just to the English. I think it would be a betrayal to the whole of the United Kingdom. It would be an appalling thing to have such a shabby and shoddy deal.
Why would it be shabby and shoddy to have a coalition? We've got one now.
Between Labour
You've
and
got one.
No, between Labour and the SNP, was the gentleman.
Yes, I know.
I don't have a problem
I heard the
with,
question too.
I'm talking about Labour and the SNP. It would be extremely shoddy. I'll tell you why, as you've asked, and I'll continue. If you just take the example we've just been talking about in Trident, Alex Salmond has made it absolutely clear that it's a complete red line for the SNP. The SNP will not go into a coalition with Labour unless they too commit to the non-renewal of Trident. So the question for the Labour Party is, are you actually going to put that at risk, at peril? You're not.
No.
Well, then you won't be able to go into coalition with the SNP.
I thought
they've
she said
made
the
it
opposite
absolutely
today.
clear.
Who?
I thought Nicola Sturgeon said that they would be deal by deal, even if Trident is...
well, look,
Lucy Bell.
I mean, look...
You're meant to know this stuff, sorry.
I mean, a Labour SNP coalition is not at all being discussed. It's not planned. We don't want it. We don't need it. You know, we couldn't be clearer than that. We are working for a Labour majority in this election, and that's what we're working.
That goes without saying. That's not his
I think
question.
it's an important point.
Yeah, no, everybody says that. Opinion polls show you saying that you won't get it.
Okay, but the Tory party, I mean, this is the whole hype about this week and this awful poster that the Tories have put around. This is a
Which poster is this that's so awful?
This terrible one with the Ed Miliband in Alex Salmond's pocket, which no one understands what it's actually
What's
about.
wrong with that?
Well, it's a terrible poster that actually no one understands. Not anyone normal and not in the Westminster world doesn't understand that.
I think
that
they do
poster.
get it.
And it's a steal anyway.
Yeah, but what?
I think they know exactly
No, and I think it's a really important
It's the kind
point.
of thing his lot would be up to, let's face it.
But I think
Originally,
it's a really
was
important point.
David Owen was the big one, and then David
Steele.
Steele was in the pocket. It was a spitting image sketch.
But if I could
and
just...
the Tories have knocked off the idea and done it very badly, which is essentially their policy.
And David Owen always said...
David Steele.
David Owen always said it was the wrong way round, and actually he should have been in Steele's pocket.
Yes, he was always a populist, wasn't he?
He was. Go on,
But sorry, if I could just finish the point.
History
This has been launched this week by a desperate Tory party who, let's not forget, didn't themselves win a majority at the last election. In fact, they haven't won a parliamentary majority since 1992. It is a smokescreen from a desperate Prime Minister who wants to make leadership what this election is all about. Yet he's absolutely, avoiding and backing out and won't take part in a good old-fashioned debate.
Can you answer the question we were asked by Mr. Perdios? Would a Labour SNP coalition, quote his words, be a betrayal to the millions of English
it's not even on the table. It's not
so
an
it would
option.
be a betrayal,
It's not. I mean, it's not going to happen.
You can guarantee that the Labour Party, if you can't form a majority government and you're in a minority, you will not go into a coalition with the SNP. You can guarantee us that, can you?
Well, they're not my decisions, but I can absolutely tell you. I can tell you that it is
very senior. You are very senior, and we all know that.
Let her answer.
As far as I am concerned, and as far as I know what is going on, there is absolutely no prospect of a Labour SNP coalition. I don't think we could be clearer than that. But what you've got to ask yourself here in this election, first of all, if you're a Scottish voter and you want to get rid of David Cameron from Downing Street, which many Scottish voters do, then for every less Labour MPs that there are elected from Scotland, that's more and more likely. And you've also got to ask yourself the question about David Cameron, who looks like he's going to get obliterated in Scotland. Could he be a Prime Minister who has no representation in Scotland? He's going to virtually get wiped out in London, have no representation in the capital city. So, here is a Prime Minister, and by the way, the only party round this table who's ever done a deal with the SNP to prop them up in government are the Tory party. in the Scottish Parliament in 2007 to 2011.
There's a surprise.
All right.
So,
Mr. Berdios, what do you make of the answers you've heard so far?
No, I mean, I'm not convinced, because I think in Scotland Labour are in trouble, and they're going to have to rely on the SNP votes if they are going to form the government. And we've got finite resources, and if it's the SNP are going to demand a lot of things, and if things are transferred away from London and and English regions just to buy the votes of the SNP and for Labour to get into power, it will be a betrayal, and I don't think the voters will forgive Labour.
Charles Kennedy.
Do you know, folks, I don't know where to begin. I'm speaking as a Scot. And I've heard an awful lot of claptrap in the last few minutes, it has to be said. The question was, would the Labour Party go into... What were the words exactly?
no, he said,
would a
it be
Labour
a betrayal?
SNP coalition be a betrayal to millions of English voters?
English voters.
Right. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. In a million years, it's not going to happen.
Thank you, Charles.
Both for Labour's interests and for the interests of the Scottish National Party. The two of them are not going to get together.
Absolutely.
They hate each other. They hate each other.
What, so the Tories and the Liberals don't?
They don't. They don't.
I don't hate Charles Kennedy.
Ian,
But you've worked together despite hating each other. This is coalition.
Ian,
it's what we want.
Ian, you've known me a very long time.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a terrible admission.
You've not learned anything in the process. But coming back to the point, no, I do not think that there will be a Labour SNP coalition government. I think possibly the most likely outcome of this very unpredictable general election is quite simply that no party will have an overall majority, and you may well have a minority government, but not a coalition.
But do you envisage, you said there's no way they'll work together. Can you see SNP and Labour not joining forces, not in a coalition, but to just keep government running? You say they hate each other.
Well, I think a responsible outlook in terms of how do you manage the governance of the country, of course, I think that will be the case. But I do not think that there will be, how should we put it, I do not think there will be SNP government ministers in our coalition.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Just something unpopular. I mean, they are entitled to vote, SNP. Yeah. They are allowed to return those people as their representatives. And if they do, then it's up to the SNP to take on responsibility for the whole of Scotland. They've got to represent the people who didn't vote for them in the referendum as well. So there's got to be responsibility on both sides. If we're going to end up in a coalition, which I think we will, the point of coalitions is both sets of people have to work together for the good of the union, which apparently, Scotland voted for.
Ian,
in a majority. So you can't just say this is a terrible betrayal. It's what those people voted for.
Ian, what coalition do you anticipate?
Well, I'm with Baker. I think Labour Conservatives the winner.
I think you can be sure that's not going to be the case.
Are you being serious?
No, I mean...
Kenneth, but he was being serious. The man with the spectacles there. You say, yes, quick.
Yes. It is a UK Parliament, after all, and Scotland is part of the UK. We've had that argument. So surely it's a perfectly legitimate thing, especially as large part of the English voters already feel betrayed by the current coalition and some of the policies they've imposed upon parts of the UK. So it seems to me I would prefer a single party to rule in conjunction with getting the support of others, but it seems to me they have every right to make a coalition, because how those who've made a coalition already can disparage it or claim it's some awful thing, it seems odd.
I think we've made a good government with working with the Lib Dems, and I'm proud of the fact that we've worked in coalition.
I think we're heading into this situation partly because in Scotland, Labour could still get a very significant vote and get effectively wiped out. The certain loser from this coming election is going to be the first-past-the-post electoral system. And that's why it's actually within the hands of the British voters in this election. People have been trained over decades to often vote for the party or person they dislike the second most, to stop the people they really hate getting in. And we've just heard Lucy talking about saying, you know, you've got to vote for us to vote against the Tories. But I've got an alternative suggestion for this election, which is vote for what you believe in. Look at your local candidate, because that's who you're voting for, is your local MP. Look at the policies of their party. There's a great website called
Very
Vote for Policies.
patronising, suggests people don't do that anyway.
Well, no. I mean, people have been trained. People get leaflets through their doors saying it's a two-horse race here. People are told. People have been told all the time. They get it. So people have been doing this for decades. I've had people say to me from around the country, I've voted tactically for decades. What's wrong? And the final time I did that was when I voted Lib Dem in 2010 to keep the Tories out. They're not doing that anymore. They're saying, I'm going to try something different. And we saw there was a YouGov poll in November that said that 26% of people would vote for the Greens if they thought we could win. We've also seen a situation where on the Vote for Policies website, we're right up near the top or at the top.
Which policies? Your long-term ones earlier or the short-term ones?
Policies that are hugely popular, like bringing the railways back into public hands. We're the only party that has that policy. And we're often accused of this being a radical policy. And this is the policy that a majority of Tory voters support. But it's not a radical policy, but we're the only people saying that.
That's not what is going to determine the next election. The most important thing is the economy. And people want to know, they want a government that they feel that they feel safety with in the economy, that will look after the economy and will deliver a better future, not just for themselves, but for their children and their grandchildren.
And that's what this government absolutely hasn't delivered, with a low-wage, insecure employment
don't agree
economy.
with that. I know you don't.
Natalie Bennett, why is it that you think these 24% who would vote for you if they thought you'd win won't vote for you?
Because it's
it's in their hands. We'll find out whether they do or not. It's their choice. But the reason why
they're
YouGov
all
was asking
to come, and then they just they're holding back and voting for other people.
Well,
would you go into a coalition?
We would not in any way prop up a Tory government. We would not go into a coalition.
What about them?
We would consider supporting a minority government on a vote-by-vote basis, fighting against the austerity of this government, which has made the poor, the disadvantaged and the young pay for the error of the fraud.
Support Labour. And you know that they're going to do at least £30 billion of cuts.
On a vote-by-vote basis,
all right, let's go to our
issue
audience.
on its merits.
The person up there on the right, the man there, and then I'll go up to you there. Yes, let's hear from you. Come on.
Is Miliband not making a large mistake by not disregarding the idea of an SNP coalition? Surely if he was to do so, then those on the left in Scotland would be more inclined to vote Labour, and as such would grant Labour more power and more chance of gaining a majority.
What do you think he should do?
I think if Miliband was to openly disregard the idea of an SNP coalition...
Rule it out.
I think he'd have more chance of getting a majority.
Lucy Powell, why doesn't he do that?
Well, I mean, I've made the position pretty clear, but I think...
He's saying, why doesn't he rule it out?
I mean, I think the point is that this is for the electorate to decide the outcome of this election. You'll all be pleased to know. And we have to set out our stall on what we believe in, why we think we've got the best policies for the country. And I honestly think the minute you start looking like you're either conceding defeat or you're interested in sort of backroom deals in smoke-filled rooms over things you've got no control over, you lose the essence of what the election is about. I stood as a candidate in the last election against the Liberal Democrats in my next door constituency. If I had £1 for every person who said to me at that election that they were voting Liberal Democrat because they wanted to see a slightly more left-wing Labour government, I would have been a very rich person. They couldn't believe it in that constituency when, in the end, then the Liberal Democrats went into bed with the Tories, because once the electorate kind of decides the outcome of the election is not clear, then you lose control. It becomes about politicians, in a closed room, having discussions amongst themselves. So if you want a clear outcome, if you want a Labour government, you don't want a Conservative government, then you have to
then why don't you rule out these discussions that lead to coalitions?
Well,
so we won't have discussions.
I think I've been pretty clear about.
Well, you're talking about smoke-filled rooms. Exactly what happened with the Tories.
You've been very clear, but your leader hasn't. So if you are so clear,
he said exactly the same words that I've used tonight. Honestly, he has. He said those things, and we live in this kind of world where every little word is picked up on and all that kind of thing. If people would then say,
you to account.
but people would then say, oh, Ed Miliband concedes defeat. You know, he's not working for a Labour majority. You know, so you've got to, you're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't.
Out what
no,
you're
not
really
at all.
up to.
I think we've made it pretty. I think he has made it clear, and we have made it clear.
But if the public don't give you a clear result, you've got to work with what they give you.
Quite.
Yeah.
You, sir.
We've been pretty clear about what we won't do.
I think as a lady from the Greens said, you know, vote for who you want and work it that way. I mean, I think it's a little rich for the Conservatives lady to tell us to keep our options open for Syria, but to close our options down when it comes to getting into coalition. So I'm all for keeping your options open and see how that goes.
OK, and you, sir, up there at the back.
Natalie, have you ever considered perhaps the reason that people aren't rushing to vote for you in your droves isn't because there's some big evil conspiracy upstairs that uses the method of leaflets to control everyone, but the fact that your party is, if we're honest, a bit of a joke? I mean, I've read your manifesto online, and it's all right if you live in a anti-capitalist peace camp outside St Paul's and smoke dope all day, but in the real world, abolishing Trident and using the space to create windmills and farms and stuff doesn't really work.
Just heard a whole range of Green Party stereotypes there. And I'm afraid you haven't read the manifesto because it hasn't been released yet. What you've read are the policies for sustainable... Well, that was our fully costed manifesto.
It wasn't fully costed. It's like me saying that I don't have to work again because I'm going to wait till everyone leaves, I'm going to collect all the change off the floor, and I'm going to earn £500,000 from doing that. And therefore, it's not fully costed if you just make figures up. Like, for instance, on your wealth tax, you say that you're going to earn £40 billion a year from that. Right, the one in France earns about £2 billion a year. So you're saying you're going to earn the same in 1 year as France has done in 20 years. It just doesn't seem realistic
Well,
to
in
me.
terms of to tackle the specific wealth tax point, we've taken on board, we released a consultative paper last year, we've taken on board, we're now adjusted our figures according to what the IFS has suggested, and we're saying by the end of this Parliament we can make £25 billion a year. There's a couple of points to make. First of all, what's really changed in the world is the fact that we have new transparency in tax havens. We've got reporting procedures that mean that there's a much greater chance that we'll be able to know what people have. And there's some very interesting research out of the US that shows when people think they're likely to get caught, they do report honestly. More than 90% of them do.
How have we got onto this? This is a good idea. We all agree with that. People paying their tax.
What we're also backing is the call for within the first 100 days of the Parliament to back the tax dodging bill. So put pressure on the banks to report companies that are dodging tax and force companies to report on a country-by-country basis.
He was talking about something quite different. He was talking about palm trees.
He asked me specifically about wealth tax. I've answered the wealth tax question.
All right,
and the point about France also is there's a whole lot of loopholes in the French law that you deliberately can drive a coach and horses through. We've got a very simple proposal for the wealth tax that doesn't have all of those loopholes. And on the broader point...
I think that's just for the moment. I think I'll just go to the lady here.
I think... Going back to the main point.
Yes.
What
was the main point?
The main point about the Labour-SNP coalition,
right, thank you very much.
If I remember.
Yeah.
There's a false equivalence being drawn between the Tory and Lib Dem coalition and the Labour and SNP coalition because the former was not set out, you know, those two parties want to keep the United Kingdom together, whereas the SNP were created to break it apart.
Right.
So how can you go into government with, or even deal in any way with a party that wants to ultimately break up the country? How can that kind of party be part of government?
All right, I'll give you a brief last answer.
I mean, exactly my point. There is a huge gulf between Labour and the SNP on that issue and others. We are a different political party to the SNP, and that's why I want people to vote Labour in the election.
OK, we'll go on to another question. Conall Ferry, please. Sorry, I'll come to you on the next question. Conall Ferry, yes, far away.
Should the Metropolitan Police have had to apologise to the families of the 3 girls who left to join up with ISIS in Syria?
This was this very week, Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe, who said they'd sent a letter to the schools and he apologised for not making sure that the families... They'd sent a letter saying that one person had left this school and joined ISIS, and he apologised to the families. And there was some criticism for his having to do that, or doing that. Ian Hislop.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the problem here. Yes, it was a mess. The police did not ensure that the letters went to the parents rather than were just hidden by the schoolgirls. But He apologised for that. He then said that he wouldn't arrest the schoolgirls if they came back, which seemed to me, if they've gone to join a terrorist organisation, then that is an offence. So I'm not quite sure what the police were doing. What I think they were doing is overdoing it. And this tends to be what happens. This is very rare for me. I had some sympathy with the police. Essentially, the parents were saying, we did not police our children, you should have done so. And that, I think, is a bit difficult. We had various... On the one hand, and I totally believe this, you know, the Muslim community says we are targeted, we don't want to be snooped on all the time, we do not want it to be assumed that every time you see someone who is a Muslim, they are a terrorist. But then you cannot say to the police, you should be in my daughter's bedroom checking up what she's doing on Facebook. You can't have it both ways. So, oddly, I think I'm probably with you.
On surveillance, where do you stand?
On surveillance?
Yes.
I mean, like everybody else, I would like to see it done with fair and transparent review beforehand. So if they say, we really want to tap this guy, as they do at the moment, then you can do it. I mean, that's a fairly standard position, I think.
Charles Kennedy.
I'm with Ian, actually, on this completely. That I do not think you can expect the police, unless you're running 1984, you know, or whatever, that level of intrusion, which we don't want, which is Question Time is not about. You know, I don't think you can blame the police for not knowing what's going on in somebody's child's bedroom, frankly. And do we want that? No, I don't think we do. Don't think we do. So, I think his lot and myself are d'accord on this one.
The woman there,
if we're treating this act as a criminal offence, I agree with you that the police haven't been forced to apologise for previous criminal offences. Is this not just a way to reiterate the fear of terrorism in the media and create that kind of uproar rather than have the concept of the police having to apologise to the parents?
Natalie Bennett, you pick up on... Natalie, you pick up on this, because again, we go back to your policy website. I don't want to quote it all the time, but you said it shouldn't be a crime simply to belong to an organisation or have sympathy with its aims, meaning ISIS, all right to belong.
No, I've made it very clear that any sort of membership or support for ISIS or any similar organisation like Al-Qaeda would involve support for criminal, vicious, hideous acts around the world. That is and should be a criminal offence. And should be pursued to the full extent of the law. But to come to the specific point, and I'm going to disagree on the point about what the police apologised for was very specifically the fact that they sent home a letter that needed to reach the parents, they thought needed to reach the parents, but they did it in a very ineffective kind of way, and that's appropriate.
You're not disagreeing.
So it's appropriate to apologise for that.
Yeah.
But I think it's also very important to not go round laying blame on the fact that 3 vulnerable girls have fallen victim to this vicious organisation. We have to take all the steps that we possibly can. That means that we need to ensure that young people, all young people in our communities, feel welcome, feel supported. If they've got problems, they've got somewhere to go. We need to do everything we possibly can to protect them from hideous propaganda like that of IS, whilst acknowledging with the internet that that's not easy, and we have to balance freedom versus protection. But what we need to do is acknowledge that these are 3 vulnerable young girls who've been groomed. And we should be giving them protection if we possibly can. And just on the point, since we were on this, today we've had a report from the Intelligence and Security Committee acknowledging that our laws currently on digital surveillance are out of date and not fit for purpose. And I believe there's 3 principles we should be laying into this very clearly. First of all, surveillance should be targeted, not mass, across all of us. Surveillance should be under judicial review at all times, and we should be treating the kind of data, the details about who you sent an email to and when, in the same way as we treat the content of those emails, with those rules.
OK. Lucy Powell.
I mean, I think on one level, it's quite refreshing that the police have very quickly apologised for something that they didn't get right. And, you know, we've seen in another case this week, it's taken 25 years for the police to apologise to the Hillsborough family. So I think, you know, at least the police is kind of moved on from some of those eras. But I mean, I do have as a parent myself, you know, I have some sympathy with what Natalie was saying there, in that, you know, whether this is people being groomed to go off and commit acts of terrorism and be radicalised, or being groomed in other ways, you know, as a parent, we all worry about what our children are getting up to on the internet, how they're being protected. I mean, I was shocked that 15-year-old girls were allowed to get on an aeroplane. I thought you had to have an adult with you to get on an aeroplane. So I think one of the issues that this case has highlighted is that we kind of look at these things through the terrorism prism, and therefore it's only within that realm of the police that this is being tackled. But actually, what you would want in this sort of case is to have social services working with the school, working with the family.
Sorry,
and if it was seen more in those...
What is the answer to the question here? What are we getting at?
Well, I mean... What I'm saying is that, you know, the police made, I think, you know, an error in terms of this letter getting home to the family, and that's what they apologised for, and that's kind of refreshing. But there's a broader issue about this case in terms of how it is handled when school children, schoolgirls, are getting engaged with people in another country over the internet and are having... being influenced and being, you know, encouraged to go and leave their family and go to another country. And I think that's not just a police issue. That's my point.
OK.
Yeah.
OK, can we hear from you? And then you.
I'd just like to say to Natalie, how can you automatically assume that these girls are vulnerable? Why do you automatically assume that somebody's groomed them?
They're under the age of 16.
There's peer pressure. I knew what I wanted to do at 15. I'm sure many of the audience had a pretty good, strong idea of what they wanted to do when they was 15 years old.
But the thing is
that... Because they go away, they're vulnerable.
All right,
they're vulnerable, you're being brainwashed. Why?
Because if you're under the age of 16,
well,
you're deemed to be a child if you're under the age of 16.
So
that's what our law says.
So we're talking about the reality of the situation, not about what the law says.
Yeah,
we're talking about the reality. You use the word grooming.
Yeah.
I think you disagree with the word grooming.
Yeah. He says these vulnerable girls. Why are they vulnerable? They've chosen to go out there. That's their fault.
I'm sorry. Second panel, let me hear from you.
It's their choice.
I think, like, the police aren't some big brother that are going to monitor what, like, say, me as a young person, what I do online. I think it's sort of your parents should be there monitoring what you should do. So, surely the parents should be apologising to the police rather than it the other way around, because I think the police are busy enough dealing with other issues when it should be the parents who should monitor what their children do.
All right, and the woman up there. Yes, the three in. Yes, you.
As a young Muslim from Bradford and knowing people that are joining ISIS, I want to know, should we not be focusing on why these people are joining ISIS?
Yeah.
Quite.
Mm-hmm. And what is being done? Why are people so disengaged with British society to want to go out and join ISIS in the first place?
Absolutely. Did you say you know people? You know people who've gone out and joined ISIS in Bradford?
Yes.
And do you have any idea why they did it?
No, not personally. But I went to school with somebody that went to prison on terrorism charges. I know somebody that's been out to ISIS. It's a real issue, and it's happening within our communities. People who grew up in the same society that I grew up in are joining these terrorist organisations. Why are they so disengaged?
Yeah. And what do you have some answer? Do you have some explanation?
Well, I just don't think that they fit into society. There's issues with jobs and education.
But these are model schoolgirls. They're straight A's, they've got loving parents, they've done well at school. They're not... I mean, they may be vulnerable, but they're not underprivileged or dispossessed in any way.
No, they're not, but I think it's about creating an identity. People are disengaged with and trying to find their new identity. A lot of people came here from the South Asian community and they disengage with with those societies, and it's about finding a new Muslim British identity and disengaging with...
In terms of the caliphate and IS?
No, well, I think it's ridiculous. I think it's absolutely extreme, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous that this is happening. But we need to consider why are they going towards that? Why are they being radicalised? What is it about our society that is making these young people think like that?
The woman on your right, are you agreeing with her?
I agree that there is obviously a sense of involvement, not feeling involved in British society as perhaps the cause for why, because clearly they're relating with what's going on, and that is what is causing people to leave. I don't agree with obviously what is going on in the Islamic State, but my point was before is why, if we're treating this as a criminal offence, why have the police then be made to apologise for the acts of individual girls? Obviously, they're under the age of 16, but like the woman at the front said, they are responsible for their own actions to an extent, and their parents are responsible. So why have the police then been made to apologise for their actions?
As I understand it, I mean, I absolutely agree with you that the ultimate responsibility for any young person is the parent or the person who is the carer. And as parents, we should all take responsibility for our children. As I understand it, the police were apologising because they thought it was important that they should let the parents know about another girl, but instead of actually sending that letter directly to the parents, they gave it to the youngsters and trusted them to do it. So if it was important it went to the parents, they should have had the wit actually to send it to the parents. And I think that's what they apologised for. And that was the right thing to do, because they cocked up on it. And that if it was that important, they should have written directly to the parents. The ultimate responsibility lies, as I say, with the parents. But I have to say, the young woman next door, forgive me, obviously I don't know your name, I think the point that you made was absolutely right and valid. When anything happens on this scale and of this nature, it's right and proper that we should say what's going on. Now, it won't always be the same reasons. I don't know why these three young women, as rather girls, as Ian has said, they seem to be from loving families, they seem to be intelligent and so on and so forth. So we don't know, and hopefully we will find out. And I should imagine that it's not the same in all cases. And we have especially to ask the question, why are so many young men, young Muslim men, feeling, and I hate to use the word disengaged, but in this instance I think it's the right word to use, so disengaged from British society, and they are British, and they often consider themselves to be British Muslims, that they are going and joining this atrocious and barbaric society. And
would you agree with what Nigel Farage says about this, which is that people see a fifth column living within our country who hate us and want to kill us?
I object to that hugely, and I think it's an absolutely outrageous thing to say against our British Muslim community, the vast majority of whom are decent, law-abiding, good people, and we should welcome them and make sure that they continue to be a part of our society. Now, there are some who obviously are going and joining ISIS, and they are very dangerous, and we need to take the strong measures that we are taking against all of that, but also looking at why and then going digging deeper so that they don't go out there in the first place.
All right, the woman there in the red shirt there.
The question I'm asking is, you keep saying why, we need to debate why, but why is it that we keep asking the same question? It's been going on for such a long time. Why can't you give us the answers to why this keeps happening? It's always why.
Well, because we don't know all the answers.
But why are you looking for the answers?
Well, no, we know.
I'll give you a theory. I mean, I think it's because a narrative has been allowed to develop which is attractive to young people who are not aware of either current affairs or history, which describes a very, very simple world in which good is here in the terms of the caliphate, and it's pure and it's exciting and it's new, and evil is entirely here in the West. And that narrative, photographed very well on the internet, told extremely well by funded preachers from all sorts of Middle Eastern countries who have come into other countries in Europe, that narrative has been allowed to take hold. You lot find it ridiculous. I do too. But we haven't done enough, and I think the Muslim community, and this is parents and all, have to do more to say, we don't buy this, we know this is not true.
Correct. But there is something else.
No, hold on. I want to go on. I take one point from the man in spectacles there, and let's move on to another question. Yes.
It's easy to say these people feel disengaged with a British society, but they're also often disengaged from Muslim society as well.
Yes.
They don't associate themselves with any sort of society, and they're often... these people you often hear about being lone wolves. How are the government addressing engaging with these people directly? They talk about working with the British Muslim community. Well, they're not engaged with either the British or the Muslim community. How are they going to direct them directly and re-engage them?
And you, sir?
I couldn't agree more with what the gentleman's just said. And I mean, look, Ian, I'm a massive fan, so I'm not going to lambast you too much. But the reality is, what you're talking about is this photographed, clear image. It's that kind of rationalisation on this level that is just the insanity of it. Yes, to being portrayed this idea that, look, going over and the Caliphate state, it is what it is and it's going to promise you everything that you need to do. What you're getting from over this side is illegal wars in Iraq. You're getting the atrocities in Gaza. You're getting all the mainstream political pastime that you guys are posturing. Please don't nod, Conservative lady, because I'm not agreeing with you at all. What I'm saying is...
I might be agreeing with you.
What I'm saying is...
I'm agreeing with you.
Right, you're absolutely right, and you've dedicated a lot of your your time to exposing a lot of this nonsense that comes out of the political mainstream. But what this gentleman is saying, and what you're saying, and there's a grey area in between. The grey area in between is disengaged, disenfranchised, all of these words, and then sweeping statements like the Muslim community need to deal with this. No,
what I said, it needs to reinforce the narrative, and which is really interesting, saying these people are not in the mainstream Muslim community, they've dropped out.
Look,
hold on.
Absolutely, yeah, you need to reinforce the religion, but what I'm saying is that, from your perspective, it's not as simple as just they're promising idealism and what they're getting over here is negative. What they're getting is a complete confusion, whether it be from family, from faith leaders, and this idea that the Muslim community has got this single voice that just goes, everybody be good now. What world are you living in?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hold on.
Why don't you stop at politics?
The man up there in the third row from the back. You, sir. Yes. Yes, you.
Thank you. I think, as being brought up as British, living in the society, I think we're very lucky in regards to everything that we've got here. I think give the police and the security forces and the intelligence services the powers that they need to keep everybody safe. As a Muslim, we condemn violence in any form, and we think about people's safety and security. What's portrayed in the media, I don't think it's not true at all. We condemn all forms of murder and violence, and I think
so what do you make of the things we've been talking about, the people who leave this country to join ISIS?
I've been brought up with British values. My family migrated from being a young age. I've been taught, my parents have kept control on me. They've told me how lucky we are, how fortunate we are as a Muslim to be living in this country, to be in society. The lady made a point downstairs there where she said that people feel disengaged. Now, we need to get to the root cause of why people feel disengaged, because as a Muslim being brought up in this society, we are very lucky. We do have lots of freedom and flexibilities, and it's about tackling these ideologies that people are having about this religion being extreme when it's not, and it is peaceful.
Okay. And the man in the check there, and then I'll go to the woman in red there. Yes.
Yeah, having made the original question, I think we've strayed somewhat far away from what the point of the question was. The point was not where these young ladies ended up. It was the fact that I think it quite absurd that the police had to apologise for a letter that contained no more than the parents would already have known. Because something like that happens in your daughter's school, there is absolutely no way that you don't know about it. And I think for the families to have sought an apology for the police, and for the police then to have put their commissioner out there to apologise, when they're trying to police a city of 12 million people and wanted a letter handing over personally.
Sorry, sir, I just think I think that was the whole point, that school people, it wasn't widely known. That's why they wanted to write it down.
So you're making an assumption about what the parents knew that I don't think you can know.
I'm a parent of daughters at school, and I know every single bit of gossip that happens in that school on a daily basis. If somebody from a school runs off to join ISIS, believe me, every parent will know that before the day is out. That was not my point where the girls were going. It was the fact that it was absurd that the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police was expected to be wheeled out for an apology for something that should have been spotted by the family.
The woman in red there had a hand up in the second row from the back.
Yeah, the lady down there, she was saying that in the Muslim community they feel a bit detached, they can't get jobs, and this is possibly one of the reasons why they're running off to ISIS. I'm English, white British. So I can't get a job, you know. There's plenty of people here who are white British can't get a job. We're not any different, but we don't want to go away and start blowing people up, do we, really?
OK. Well, we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I think we might just possibly fit in this question from Ryan Hemingway, please. Ryan Hemingway.
Can the BBC really afford to lose Jeremy Clarkson?
It had to happen. The reason that this question is interesting is because 750,000 people, according to the latest figure, have signed a petition calling on the BBC to retain his services. Natalie Bennett, are you a petrol head? Are you?
Well, it probably won't surprise anyone in the audience or at home to know that I have never watched Top Gear. So I don't have a critical view on this. I'm well aware that there's clearly an audience for this, but the BBC does have responsibility for the behaviour of its presenters. And at the moment, we're talking about an incident which is still subject to an inquiry, and like everybody else, Jeremy Clarkson is entitled to innocent until proven guilty. But I think if you look at his track record and his behaviour over a number of years, I think now would be a really good time for him to move on in his life and stop collecting licence fee payers' money and take another job on.
OK. Ian Hislop?
Me?
You?
Yes. Well, I'm the only other person who's been assaulted by Clarkson. He threw a biro at me live on Have I Got News For You, which stabbed me in the eye here.
Oh.
We had to stop recording. He refused to believe it was blood. He said it was red biro. And then he apologised afterwards. So, if he's going to be done for assault,
and I want
other offences.
You were there.
You were there as well.
I was there
too. It's a true story, is it? I thought it was apocryphal.
It's a true story. I saw Mr. Hislop give forth blood.
Blood. We had to stop recording. But look, that's just my personal history. Basically, my main objection to this is that the Prime Minister, who can't spend any time debating the main issues of the day, puts out a statement.
Yes, Lucy.
Well, look, for me, this one's really easy. I mean, I think this guy should get the sack. You know, I watch Top Gear with my 10-year-old stepson every Sunday. I think it's a funny programme. He's a good presenter. But I'm sorry, over many years now, you know, this guy has proved himself to be sexist, to be racist, and now we find out this week to be violent. You know, in any other walk of life, if you were on a final written warning and you assaulted a subordinate, you would get the sack, and I think the same should apply to him.
No, your Prime Minister hopes it can all be sorted out because his children like Top Gear.
I like Top Gear and I watch it all the time.
Can the BBC really afford to lose Jeremy Clarkson?
I think, you know what, dare I say it, David? But no presenter is ever bigger than the show, and all presenters are dispensable. I think it's...
Not my show, it's Question Time.
No, I know, but there is often that
Dimbleby
feeling.
if the food isn't hot.
I live off cheese platters.
I think with Jeremy Clarkson it is a real sadness because he's actually a very, very good presenter. He's genuinely funny. He does some great interviews, but he's also...
The word sadness is pushing it a bit, isn't it?
The woman at the back there.
He's also paying a great deal of our money.
Can I just... somebody as good as that, but he's just an idiot.
You
and he's
can't
behaved very
say
badly.
he's not entertaining. Loads of people tune in to BBC just to see him on Top Gear. However, how can they possibly keep him on after everything he's done? How can... They need to make that an example.
Well, even with the Prime Minister's backing.
No, he didn't
How
back
is it acceptable?
He did back him.
You know,
You
in
said he
any
was
other
an idiot.
workplace,
You asked
it wouldn't
David
be
Cameron-
acceptable. So why is it acceptable for him?
If he hit or went to hit somebody, he's curtains, isn't he?
Okay.
And he has to be. It's the
Charles
right
Kennedy,
thing. He can't do
in
that.
or out
Can't
for
do
He's
that.
very loyal to his friends, Mr Cameron. You ask Andy Coulson.
You're shocking. You're shocking.
Right.
Jeremy Clarkson, the future. This is very politically incorrect of me, but end of Gone with the Wind. Frank, my dear, I do not give a damn.
Well said.
Simple as that.
And that's our up. I'm sorry not to be allowed more time. No, well, we only have an hour, you know. Maybe if they move the schedules a bit, we might be. Anyway, next week we're going to be in Croydon next week in London, and we've got on the panel there Will Self, Kirsty Allsop, the television presenter, and the three politicians so far: Shirley Williams, Chukwuemeka, and Sajid Javid. That's next week in Croydon. After that, we're going to be in Bolton the week after that. So if you'd like to come either to Croydon or Bolton, you know how to apply. There's the address on the screen. You can go online or you can call us on 0330 123 9988. If you're listening on 5 Live, the debate goes on, as you know, on Question Time, Extra Time. It stops here. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks to our panel. Thanks to all of you who came here to Leeds to take part. Until next Thursday, good night.
Well, this week meets Top Gear next, plus as the election approaches, is politics getting more vicious? And what are the issues which matter to teenagers today? Andrew Neil and guests coming up on BBC One in just a moment.